Hi, my name's Greg McQueen. You can find me at gregmcqueen.com, and I'm producing a series of podcasts about producing transmedia. And today I'm interviewing Joanna Penn because I think she's a really awesome and useful resource online, and she's a transmedia producer. Well, when did it all first start? I mean, well, what came first? Kind of the writing or the media production, or how did it all kind of start, and how did it all come together?
Right, well, I was an IT consultant, so, business consultant with Accenture and some of those bigger management consultancies. And I guess I hit sort of 33 and was like, oh, I'm just, wasting my life, blah, blah, blah. So I decided to write a book, my first book. I always wanted to write a book, but I decided this time I would really do it. And it would be about career change. And in the process of investigating it, I would actually change my own career, find out what I really wanted to do, that type of thing. And I'm actually about to re-release that book. It's called How to Love Your Job or Find a New One. But basically I wrote that back in 2007, ended up self-publishing it in 2008 and sold 0 copies of that book. So then I was like, okay, so what's wrong with this picture? I'm a highly educated person. I've done the best I can with the book. I've had it professionally edited. What's going on? And I discovered I knew nothing about marketing at all. No marketing or sales experience. So I went on this big sort of 6-month kick of learning everything I could about marketing. Plus I was living in Australia, a country of 20 million people. So I really wanted to aim at America, 260 million people. So I decided that I would look at online marketing. So when I started to learn about online marketing, I sort of discovered podcasting. So at that point, and blogging. So I'm sure some people, maybe Yaro Starak from Entrepreneur's Journey, but he has a great blog, and I did his blogging course, started the blog, started to share what I learned, and then I started the podcast in order to add multimedia in a way, but also so I could interview people like this and essentially learn from them. So I would learn, but also I would have something to put out there. And I love listening to audio, as many people do. So that was kind of the start. I got into all of this because I had a book that wasn't selling. And from there, it's just kind of snowballed since.
Okay. And how, when you say you kind of started going into podcasting, how did you start? What kind of equipment did you start out with, and where did you kind of, what services did you use?
Right, well, back then it was really funny actually. The very first interview I did was with, and actually I'm going to hopefully have her back on the show, a book called 4 Ingredients was this breakout self-published book in Australia, sold millions of copies, and these ladies are mega rich now. Anyway, so she's quite a big deal, and I was so nervous. But all I had at the time, I didn't have a clue about anything, and this was 2008. So Skype was around, I think, but I didn't use it. And so I had the phone. I literally phoned her up, put it on speakerphone, and I held a handheld recorder over the phone. So that interview's still on my site, but clearly the audio production is not exactly great. So I did that, and then I used Audacity, which many people still use, and then I still use now Blubrry plugin for WordPress, which is basically the PodPress, I think, Blubrry PodPress. Yeah. So it's a really good plugin, and it's just got better. But since then, I've moved into using obviously Skype. I use Ecamm for the Mac. I use I still edit, and then I use Amazon S3 storage now. So it's changed a lot.
So really, I think what's interesting about that is because you seem to have discovered the need to want to share stuff and want to make a podcast and start sharing some of the things that you've learned. And what's interesting to me is that you just used what you had available. You didn't go out and suddenly think, I need to buy, thousands of pounds worth of software or anything like that. You just kind of maybe, went to Woolworths probably and bought a little recorder. And
it was like this big.
Yeah. So, well, I think that's an important lesson for starting to produce transmedia, is to use what you have rather than feeling like, you have to really spend a lot of money and have really lots of fancy equipment or anything like that.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I mean, I at the time, I had zero traffic on my blog. I was nothing, nobody, nowhere. I was mainly doing it because I wanted to learn from these people, but I thought if I put it out there, it might also get me some traffic because it was a bit different.
Yeah. And how, from starting to do that to really starting to get a following, and how long would you say, it took before people really started to pick up on what you were doing online?
I think that, and I was just actually writing a comment on another blog about Entreproducer, which you probably look at, Brian Clark's new blog, which you should have a look at. It's all about this stuff. Entreproducer.com. Is that the analytics side I am terrible at. I am really, really good at ideas and creating stuff and putting it out there, but I'm terrible at actually looking at stats and working out figures and what works and what doesn't work. And so I haven't measured exactly, but essentially I think it probably took a year of the blog before I started getting any real attention in terms of comments and traffic, but I really think it took, and I'm at just over 3.5 years now, probably it was 2 years before it would be considered decent traffic, and I only went full-time as an author entrepreneur last October, so coming up to 3 years full-time blogging, podcasting, video production, everything. So it was always my aim to make it a full-time thing, but it took a long time to build. So I would say people have to keep it going for like at least a year. But also I think to remember is that's why you've got to choose a topic that you're passionate about or that you are really interested in, because as I said, I do the podcast and videos and stuff because I'm learning. So it doesn't matter what the result is because I'm still enjoying it and it's not a chore. I think that's really important.
So how, let's talk a little bit about the different things that you do, because of course you blog, so that's text, you make a podcast. You've also, when did you start producing videos? Was that quite early on, or? No,
that was probably about 18 months after the podcast. And I think the main reason why is I was reading some of the top blogs and they were talking about how video was coming. I think it was when Google bought YouTube, and basically the view was that because YouTube was the number 2 or the number 1 search engine, depending on the day, and that Google had this technology that was going to do voice recognition, which meant that you were going to start ranking for keywords that you were talking about, not just that were in a blog post. And I thought, well, why not get into this? And also being an author, so mainly I'm a fiction author, not many authors put their face out there. Most of them are kind of shy introverts, and I'm an introvert but not that shy. So I thought I would try it, and of course it's very hard to start, but now I do interviews and most of them are video. So I don't use a mic anymore for the podcast, so I do the video interview like this, then I turn the video into the audio which I use in the podcast, and then I get, at the same time, I get a video, a 30-40 minute video, which some people say are too long, but they're getting traffic. So yeah, I guess so 18 months after audio. Okay.
And I guess maybe you've already answered my next question. Well, one of the things which I really think defines what people are calling a transmedia producer is that everything they do has equal status. So, I mean, I follow you on Twitter, for example, and I know you're there a lot and you treat that very seriously. You also, of course, podcast. You treat that very seriously. That's, now making videos. And I know your Facebook page, I don't know how many followers you have on your Facebook page, but it's probably quite a lot. I mean, you have nearly 30,000 followers on Twitter, so it's pretty equal.
It's only about 2,500 on Facebook.
Oh, is it? Okay. Facebook is dying.
I'm on Google Plus.
I'm on there, but I haven't really leapt onto Google Plus. I'm not sure why. I really love Twitter. I don't know.
I love Twitter too, but Google Plus for SEO is the way forward.
Yeah, I guess so, because it's all linked like that. But do you have this attitude that everything? I mean, even kind of writing and publishing books compared to all the blogging and podcasting and stuff. In your mind, it all has equal status, or is that?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I think is important for people to remember, and what I've found and what I've been surprised about, is that there is a different audience in each of those areas. Now, of course, some people go between Twitter and the blog, but there are few people who read my text posts who also listen to the podcast, and there are people who listen to the podcast who would never watch a video or who would never visit my blog. So there are, and like, for example, I have 15% of my podcast listeners are in China, and I think it's only about 2% of my text posts are in China. Now, I know I say I don't do analytics, but that's the easiest analytic, is where people are, and that I'm interested in that, So so that I think that's important for people to remember. So they do have equal importance, because that may be the way that somebody finds you, is through one of those things. So they all have to be really good. And I think and they serve different purposes as well. Like I said, for SEO, as far as I know, a podcast, the audio file of a podcast, there is no way that can be indexed by Google, because that's like a file on your site. So I write a text post that has key phrases in, so that can be indexed, but the podcast itself goes out on iTunes and all the other podcatchers. So I think they're very different medium for different audiences. I must say, like Blogcast FM, for example, is a really popular one, and I have real issues with that. I think, firstly, I don't think the quality is very good. The sound quality is not great. Also, I don't think that you own the content. I think Blogcast FM own the content, and they put adverts all over it and everything. I really like owning the content, and I pay for hosting on my Amazon S3 account of those audio files. And of course, I always say the person I'm interviewing also owns the rights to that file as well, and they can use it however they like. I have backups of the videos if YouTube went wrong. So I always own that content, because if you rely on one site, like people relying on Facebook or Audioboo or whatever, if you rely and you have your content on that site, and then that site goes bust or goes horribly downhill, I can't even remember that social network that kind of went off the boil.
MySpace. Although that seems to be making a comeback now.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. If what happens if you're heavily reliant on one place? So I think that people really need to consider that. It may cost a bit more to do it when you're self-hosting, but I think that empowers you a lot more, and you have more freedom.
So how I mean, I think some people would say, becoming a transmedia producer is all very well, but it takes a lot of time. How do you divide up your time, and how do you make sure that you treat it all equally? Because you need to find time for writing, and then you need to produce a podcast. You've already described how you do your interviews on video, and then you split up the audio and the video, which I think is a really smart thing to do, actually. But how do you divide up your time? Make sure you've got time to do everything.
It's very hard, even now. I mean, up to last October, so I did the podcast for 2.5 years, pretty much working full time and everything else. And it was hard, but as I said earlier, it's stuff I'm passionate about. And I would often, because I was in Australia, I would often do interviews at 5 a.m. Australia time, which was a decent time in America, decent time in England. So that was much easier. In fact, I think when we spoke, I was in Australia.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so actually, basically it's about priorities, and let me also say what the podcast does for me in terms of traffic and business. First of all, if you spend half an hour with someone, especially on video, face to face, we form much more of a personal connection than we do if we just are on Twitter, or even just when we were on the phone, where now we can see each other. So for me, spending half an hour on the phone with some kind of mover and shaker in my industry is really good for me, because it banks up that social karma. At some point, we can all call on each other and ask for favors that are within the scope of our friendship. You know what I mean? It's about give and take. It's a very generous community. I also provide, I can get content which gives me traffic to my blog. The person I'm interviewing will generally promote it on their site. So you get all of these different benefits from that one thing, that if I write a text post, the only benefit I get is some, that my followers read a text post and that I get some Google SEO, but it doesn't compare to the immense amount of other stuff you get from this type of interaction. So I think it's a case of making time for it. And I tend to have a podcast once every week or once every 2 weeks. And so I'm scheduled out to July. We're in April, so I'm always scheduled a few months in advance with all the interviews. So yeah, it's more about what's important, and for me, cultivating relationships is important.
So how do you actually find content? I mean, most of what you do, I guess, media wise is interviews with people. How do you find the people, and how do you kind of find things to talk about with them?
Well, this is the thing. I have so much I want to talk about. So mostly it's Twitter, and it's people I already have met on Twitter and have a relationship with through Twitter. It's my kind of number one source. So, for example, yesterday somebody tweeted me and said, actually, how do I make a podcast? So I tweeted them back an article that I wrote about how to make a podcast, and then she tweeted me again and said, wow, that's brilliant. And I clicked on her profile, and this is how Twitter works. You know this. Yes. Once people interact with you, you click on their profile, and I discovered that she's an expert in world religions, religious studies, religion in politics, and I have a master's in theology. I'm a total nut about religion, and my books are based around kind of religious stuff, so kind of Dan Brown meets Lara Croft action adventure. But so I emailed her and said, look, I'd love to interview you about how authors can use religion in their books while being sensitive, but also in politics. And I mean, that's a fascinating topic. And then another guy emailed me and said, look, I've been following your blog. It's really great. I'd like to give something back to you. I'm a Canadian Mountie homicide investigator, forensic specialist. Is there any way I can help you? And I'm like, sure, I'd love to have you on my podcast to talk about what authors get wrong with forensics. I mean, that's brilliant. Right. So essentially, I think this starts to snowball. When you're starting out, you have to just ask people, and most people want to talk about themselves for half an hour or an hour, which, like, you've asked me, and I've said, yeah, of course. So most people will say yes, and then from there you just organise it.
Yeah. So would you say the key for you is, I mean, you're very passionate about a particular subject, which is writing. But it sounds that even if you find people to interview and talk to and content that's a little bit outside of that field, you always find a way to tie it into kind of your core passion. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's critical for anyone online. You have to have your niche, and my niche is writing, publishing, and book marketing. So I do that whole gamut, basically. But yeah, so anything that I can bring in. So I just did an interview last night with an Amazon #1 best-selling author who we talked about metadata on Amazon and how to use the description box and things like that. So that's marketing. But essentially, if I think you can twist anything to any niche as well, and also help people promote other things. So when we talked, we were talking about 100 stories for Haiti. Yeah. So I think it is really good, but I will never just do something that's promotional. So it has to give value to my audience, and then it can be promotional for the person involved as well, because they get to talk about it.
Yeah. Okay. And what, compared to like the tools that you used when you first started, can you be very specific about the tools that you use now? Do you still use Audacity, for example?
No, I was going to actually I've forgotten. I use Amadeus Pro.
Okay, yeah, I know that one.
So I use, I'm on a Mac, so I use Skype for the video, and I use Ecamm, ECAMM, for the Mac, which automatically records your Skype conversations into a .mov. So that's a movie format. So that's brilliant, because then what I do after the chat is I use a program called ScreenFlow on the Mac, and I edit the video first. So I'll take the movie, edit the video, put head and tail on it, then I've got a video. Then I use the movie tools thing that I have on the computer to turn the movie into an MP3. Then I go to the Amadeus, record an introduction, put in the MP3, put the intro and outro on it, save the file, upload the file to Amazon S3, and then I use the Blubrry PodPress plugin for WordPress to put the file on the blog, and I upload the video to YouTube, and then I embed the YouTube video on the blog post, and then I write some notes. So I reckon it probably does take me 3 hours, maybe three to 3.5 hours per show.
Okay. And do you actually edit the shows? I seem to remember when we did that interview over the phone, you tend to do it in a way where you record it and it goes straight out. Do you do any editing on the shows that you produce? Or?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I edit when I edit when it is necessary, or technically necessary, or when somebody wants something edited. But I think I don't spend a lot of time post-production. I edit out swear words, for example, because I have a clean show. But I do like to keep things quite natural. I think also on YouTube, I think most people appreciate having natural and real stuff. That if they want professional video or professional audio, they're going to go buy it from somewhere. But this, this is free, people. But yeah, so I guess I should say if for people watching, on the PC, you can use Pamela for Skype, which records like
I've heard of that one. Yeah.
And you can also use just the free Movie Maker on a PC, or Sony Vegas if you get a little bit good at it.
A little bit fancy.
Yeah. But you can definitely do it for free. Like you said, you don't have to do things that are expensive. And Skype is free. So now there's no real excuse if you want to start doing something like this.
So if you were to kind of travel back in time to when you first started and visit yourself, what's the one big piece of advice you'd give yourself about producing this kind of stuff from down when you started?
Well, it's funny. I look back and I think I pretty much haven't stopped podcasting, and I think advice to people is don't stop if you enjoy it. So I'm at 126 episodes right now, and I've got 120 odd videos as well on YouTube. So by producing something every week, you build up a pretty big backlist. And what I'm finding now is people are finding me and they are downloading all 126 episodes. And you think of as somebody who is putting themselves out there looking for an audience, if people are downloading that much, that's 60 hours worth of listening to my voice,
Well, you have a lovely voice.
Oh, thank you. Well, me and all my guests, but what they're basically doing is they know me by then. Like you said, you feel like you know me more from having a look at my stuff. People really feel like they know you, and they send emails that say, I feel like I'm your friend, and that's just brilliant. You can't do that with a text post. So I'd probably go back and say to me, it's worth it, hang in there, keep on going, and you will get better at this, because it was pretty bad at the beginning.
What about the future then? I mean, you're talking about persisting at it. Are you going to keep persisting? You got big plans, or?
Oh, I mean, there's no big plans. It's just a consistent approach, as in I will continue podcasting, I will continue video, I will continue blogging. I think now what's happened is now I've gone full time. I have the Creative Pen is my business. So I sell courses from the site. I have paid speaking gigs, none of which I have to pitch for because people ask me based on my online platform. So it becomes this quite powerful thing after about 3 years. Some people do it quicker, but what I can see in front of me are people, and for me, Mitch Joel, you know Mitch Joel at 6 Pixels of Separation?
No.
Well,
I'll go and look him up.
Yeah, look him up because he's had a podcast for years, and he's awesome, and his podcasts are awesome. It's probably the one I listen to every single episode of. I listen to a lot, but that one I always listen to. And he's kind of my podcast guru because he does interviews every week, and I like how he does it. But I look at where he is. I think he's at 250. I look at bloggers like Brian Clark from Copyblogger, who has been blogging for 7 years, I think. Darren Rouse, 6-7 years. So I think for all of us online, there's obviously a threshold where you can make, I mean, I'm making a living, but they're making a very good living. So I can see where things are going, but the only way to get there is to continue doing what I've been doing so far. So yes, I'm going to continue podcasting, doing videos, blogging, because it's fun as well. It's not just about business, clearly.
No, you can see it just talking to you now. I mean, you seem like you're just having so much fun doing it, and I really think that's really important. That it's not. When you sit here and talk to me about marketing, and you sit here and talk to me about, all those kinds of, I mean, marketing to certain people is a bit of a dirty word. But you say it in such a way that it's like, I just love doing this. This is what I do. I'm going to put out this information, and, if you enjoy it, great. If you don't, then you really don't have to,
you don't
really
have to listen.
Tune in.
No, you're right. And I think, to me, and I think this is something that I try and share with a lot of authors for whom marketing is a dirty word, is that marketing is sharing what you love with people who will enjoy hearing about it. You're not forcing yourself on anyone. It's that whole attraction marketing concept that you're offering useful or, I mostly offer useful information. I'm not funny, but I can be useful. So, be useful, be entertaining. And if you're getting a lot from it yourself, then why would you ever stop? And I think the other thing to say about this is that you don't know what you're capable of until you try. Like the whole video thing, I was petrified, and there I did make a mistake. I bought a Sony camera, like an expensive Sony camera. Don't need that. I've got a flip cam now, or you can use your iPhone, or you can use really cheap stuff now to do videos, and now I literally just hold a video camera and talk like this, and it's great. But when I started, I was so nervous, and I had to do so many takes, and I was very wooden. So you have to go a bit outside your comfort zone. Like we all hate our voice. I hate my voice, but you get over that. So you have to expand beyond your comfort zone. So for me, I think you talk about what's next as well. I probably would like to do something with my fiction, like maybe an audiobook, something like that. But the people who do really good fiction podcasts, and I think of Scott Sigler, I don't know if you know Scott Sigler, he's awesome podcast fiction author, and he does sound effects, and J. Daniel Sawyer as well, as he's won awards for putting all these effects on and sound things and make a big production out of it. So I'm not there yet, but maybe that's something I'll try.
Well, thanks a lot, Joanna, for today. It's been really, really useful to talk to you about transmedia, and it's going to be a really good contribution to my thesis for my degree.
And thanks for having me, Greg. It's been great.